Welcome to Noble, a network of owners, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. Here, we focus on the 5 stages of business: launching an idea, establishing a business, hiring employees, creating leaders, and then expanding your impact. We hope you enjoy today's session.
All right. So our agenda over the next hour and about 45 minutes. We're going to be going over the Working Genius, talk about a lot of different things with that. Then about probably 40, 50 minutes, we'll be able to take a 10-minute break for everybody to take a break. So don't try to pin you down for the whole 2 hours. And then in the second half of the meeting, we'll get into individual reports and team reports and even more exciting stuff. But probably the first 45 minutes, we're just going to kind of talk about the overall structure and understanding the model and so forth. So the Working Genius model. So as I mentioned, this was developed by Patrick Lencioni, who is the founder of the Table Group, which is a very, very well-known and respected among enterprise businesses. They have consulted with some of the top Fortune 100 leadership teams and so forth. You might have heard of, if you have a business or involved with a large company, you might have heard of his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's probably the book that he's most well known for, but he's written a number of other books. And right around the COVID time, Patrick was thinking about the types of work that, you have those days where you can literally put in like a 14-hour day and you're just in flow. And when you're done with the day and you go home, you actually have more energy than when you started the day. We've all had, those great, great moments and with a lot of flow and that kind of thing. But then there's also those days where, like, man, you could be putting in 2 hours and you are just completely exhausted and drained. And oftentimes we think about things like, oh, maybe it's related to our diet or, how we slept or, just not getting enough sleep or stress or just all these different factors that we can think about physically in our lives that might impact that. And obviously those do definitely impact us in many of those ways. But he was realizing that what if there's just particular types of work that actually give us energy and that drain us? And he calls those basically our geniuses. And so when you're in your genius, that you're doing the type of work that actually fulfills you and gives you energy. And then you have the work that will cause frustration. And so that's the type of work that will just completely drain your energy. And then you have work that are in your competencies. And so as he was thinking about this, he pulled his team together and he started brainstorming with them around, somewhat of the different types of work and the model and so forth. And so, like I said, back just after COVID, right around 2001, 2002, he came up with this model and wrote his book and published it. So it's a pretty recent model. And the cool thing about this model is that it is not a personality assessment. So we've all taken like DISC and all these different personality assessments. And how many of us have actually really been able to apply some of those things into our day-to-day? It's like we tend to sit through a class that tells us what those results are or read the results and we're like, yeah, that totally sounds like me, but then what? And sometimes even our companies will make big investments in those and it's like we'll all do the assessments as a team and then it's just like it kind of fizzles. And even with some training, it's like, okay, wait, what were you? And what does this mean? And those types of things. And some of them can really get a bit complicated and really tough to apply. And so the beautiful thing about this is that it's not a personality assessment. It's maybe 20% personality assessment, but it's about 80% productivity tool. So this does not tell you what you're good at or what you're not good at. It just tells you about your genius in productivity and what gives you energy and what drains you. And so the really nice thing about this is that it becomes very, very easy to apply at work. So ever since I read the book, and I probably only got about a third into the book before I started buying assessments and sending it out to a bunch of my employees. And then after them taking it and them getting excited about it, I actually went out and went through the certification to become certified on it because I wanted to basically assess my entire company, in which I have about 65 employees. And I really saw this as a powerful tool to, just really help improve the culture of our team and, really feel that my team, or if they could all be working in their genius, or at least mostly in their genius, just how powerful that would actually be. And, especially after COVID, I had a number of people that I could tell were working in their, competencies or even in their frustrations and were dealing with frustration and just weren't necessarily getting the joy and fulfillment out of work. And so I really saw this as a tool to help with that. And it really has for most of the people in our organization, and even a lot of people that have been able to recognize that perhaps that the work that they were doing day to day wasn't in their genius. And so we have some people that have actually moved on into other work, but they're doing more work that is actually giving them fulfillment than the seats that we actually had. The beautiful thing about what I like about this model is the fact that it actually does tie to um, our unique gifts and that are given up to us by God. That we are all part of a body, the body of the Holy Spirit, and that we are all have these great gifts. And one of the things that I really love about this model, and in fact, Patrick Lencioni is a very strong Christian, and so all of these do have biblical principles and so forth that shows up a lot in his work. But the cool thing about this model is that there are people who basically have all the geniuses. And so we'll get into, things like some of the guilt and, things that we have when we might be in an area of frustration. And the beautiful thing is that God gives us within the body other people that can actually come and be helpful in those areas that might be our frustration, but are the geniuses in others. And so one of the things that I really love about this model is the idea of how to engage and collaborate with each other in a better way, because we are all here to help each other. And if we actually know what each other's geniuses are and what our frustrations are, that way we can actually work and collaborate together in a much more impactful and beneficial way. So when Patrick sat down and identified what the different geniuses and what the different types of work are, he came up with 6 different um, types of work. And so basically, those 6 different types of work are wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. And so what he recognized is that everybody will have 2 different geniuses, 2 competencies, and 2 frustrations.
Mm.
And so we all have 2 geniuses, and they are usually in 2 different areas. They don't have to be both together. They might be spread apart, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But what he recognized is the first part of work before anything can get done is that there's usually somebody who has the genius of wonder, and they love to speculate and to question. They're the ones who are asking questions like, why are the things the way they are? Is there a better way? Is this the most potential we can achieve from this? They love to sit in kind of the ambiguity and imagine the different possibilities. They're the ones who are able to basically see the opportunities that are out there and be able to ask the questions around that. So they're the big question people, on that. And then you have the next level, which gets into invention. And the genius of invention are the people who are like, man, that's a great question, or that's awesome that you see that opportunity. He goes, let me try to solve it. And they're the people who really, really get their energy out of putting things together and creating ideas that can actually invent things that will actually solve those big questions and fulfill those opportunities or and so forth. And that's where they get their genius from. And the thing is that when he created those two, he originally thought that there were just four major geniuses. Because usually when we think about ideation, we then think about implementation. And so that's where then he just immediately went to, well, then you have the enablers. And so once we invent something, then people will, respond and be like, oh, wow, that's really, really cool. Let me help out. And so he discovered that there's enablers, and those are the enablers that basically will come in and basically see like, yeah, right on, let me help with that. And they'll tend to drop everything. Sometimes they might even be, squirrel and, drop one thing and go and jump into another. And that's where then we also have the gift of and genius of tenacity. And tenacity are those people that really, really love to check off those boxes and really get great fulfillment when they actually get things to completion. And what he discovered is like, well, yeah, there's a lot of that happening in organizations. You have ideation, and then you have this implementation. And the piece is he discovered that there's this middle piece that's really, really important, and that's activation. And he discovered that it's like, there's people who have the gift of discernment. And what discernment is that those are the people that will look at things in a little bit different of a way, maybe ask questions in order to, how can we actually make this better? And the beautiful thing about discernment and then galvanization, and what a galvanizer is, and this is one of the most important things, and I find this as a big gap in a lot of organizations. And actually, I actually had this as a huge gap in my organization, is even though we had 65 employees, I actually had a gap of galvanization in our organization. We would actually have people that would regularly say that they weren't clear on the vision. Of course, I always felt bad about that because I'm the visionary and I'm supposed to be the one to communicate that vision. So, but we had a lot of people that were out there that really, really weren't completely clear on the vision, and we were basically asking them to go out and enable and finish things, but they weren't completely clear on that. And that's where we discovered that, man, there are people that are actually great galvanizers. And a galvanizer isn't just a cheerleader. A galvanizer is a person who will connect with people the why. And especially when you have enablers who might be quick to jump on board on something, that generally they want to be motivated to jump into that and obviously understand the value that that can have, and then that they're going to give up their time to enable it. But especially tenacity people is they don't want to get 3/4 way down the road and find out that what they were working on and what they were trying to check those boxes off was a waste of time. And so that's really where then that importance of galvanization and discernment really comes in. And this is usually the gap where a lot of organizations have, because so many organizations will basically just jump from ideation to implementation and not have that discernment or galvanization. And one of the things, key things about discernment too, is so I'm a wonderer and inventor. And so I'm typically the one who is way up in the clouds and thinking those questions, and I can actually invent those solutions. And then I wanted my team to go out there and actually execute on those, pretty quickly. But I always saw sometimes that when people would discern me, that it was almost like they were putting a stop to my vision, and they were just coming in and trying to, just poke holes into it or trying to prevent me from actually executing on my vision. And one of the things that I learned from this model is no, a discerner is actually trying to make sure that my vision is going to be more successful. And so this is again where this activation piece becomes very, very important within organizations. We also have basically geniuses that are either responsive or disruptive. And sometimes we need to know when our geniuses, and sometimes we might be, for instance, as because I'm a wonder and inventor, I'm actually have a responsive genius and a disruptive genius. And sometimes I need to understand not only what those geniuses are, but when I'm actually responding or when I might be actually disruptive. And we have people even in our organization that are double disruptors. And those people can kind of wreak a lot of chaos in an organization and creating a lot of disruption. Or we might have double responders and that they're very responsive to different things based on their geniuses. And the kind of the biggest thing about this is being aware of how our geniuses show up to others to avoid unnecessary conflict. Because there are times where if I come in with my wonder, that might not be the right time for response, or even coming in and being an inventor and we're trying to execute on a project and I'm coming in with my wonder and invention and I might be creating that disruption in the organization. So sometimes understanding, whether our geniuses are a responsive or disruptive or both or so forth is how are we showing up or how are others showing up in meetings, and so that way we can be able to clearly communicate with each other and understand each other in a way and be able to communicate of like, hey, you know what? We don't need disruption right now. We're at the stage where we need more response. We might need more discernment or we might need enablement or we need tenacity to finish it. Now, if we're running into a problem, okay, well, now we might need to respond with maybe some ideation, maybe some wonder to ask some questions on why isn't this working out? Or needing that disruption of, okay, maybe we need to change what our plan is in order to solve this problem that's preventing us from reaching our goal. Now, this is one of probably the things that I loved about this model the most is this idea around guilt and judgment. Because my frustrations are actually enablement and tenacity. I actually don't like getting things done. I love being up in the clouds and ideating and inventing and so forth. But when it actually comes to getting stuff done, that is not my genius. And the thing is I used to beat myself up over those frustrations. I would tell myself that, all these negative things, that negative chatter in my head, because I was guilting myself and I was judging myself because I thought that I was insignificant or didn't measure up because I wasn't very good at getting things done. And one of the things that this model really, really helped me with was being able to let go of that guilt and judgment. And to the point of even recognizing that, wow, I have other people in my organization that love enablement and tenacity and want to help me because their genius is not in wonder and invention. In fact, a lot of them, their frustrations are in wonder and in invention, and that they actually want to come through and help. But one of my struggles is I had this what was called the fundamental attribution error. Does anybody ever know what the fundamental attribution error is? So one of my best examples of this is I tend to drive a little bit fast. And so we've all had those situations, Chad. Yeah, Chad. You both, Chaz and I. That's why we're both into cars. Is we do love uh, to tend to drive our vehicles, checking out the performance of a fine vehicle. And so the challenge is that we've all had those situations where we're driving and then somebody cuts us off. And as good of a Christian as I try to be, some of my thoughts in my head, and if there's nobody in the car, maybe even a few of the words that come out of my mouth probably aren't the best when it comes to that. And I'm just, unfortunately, just coming to mind with all these negative and judgment of the person who just cut me off. And yet there might be times where I'm in a rush and I might accidentally cut somebody off. And then that fundamental attribution is like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm in a rush, or that was my bad. I made this mistake. So I'm forgiving of myself. And yet I'm still judging other people for when they cut me off. And the same thing happens within this is I might be judgmental of myself for not having strength in a particular genius, or I might actually judge others for not thinking like me or having my geniuses. And this is where the fundamental attribution error comes in, is that guilt or judgment of others for not having our geniuses. And then we get frustrated because, and this happens a lot, especially I'll see it a lot with people with a genius of tenacity, and they're working in a team of people that are supposed to be getting jobs done, and yet they might have somebody on the team who that's their frustration, so they may not work quite as hard as what they see, and so then that generates some frustration because it's like, oh, you're not working as hard as me. Well, it's kind of maybe an alignment error, and that was a very key piece of me implementing this in my organization, is so we can recognize who the finishers are, and we call them especially the enablement tenacity people, the loyal finishers, the people that love checking off those boxes. And then if we have people that have the frustrations of enablement tenacity, that they probably shouldn't be doing that type of work, that there's other types of work that they can be doing. And then as long as they understand that around each other, that they can see the value of each other's geniuses and how those are showing up, and that'll allow overall team health improvement and those types of things. So I talked a little bit about, talking about myself in that wonder and genius, and I love being, kind of up in the clouds. And there is this altitude of genius, in that we have, wonder, which, think of that as being kind of almost 30,000 feet in the air. And then think of it as like we're trying to land a plane. And the work is that the wonder is looking at the really big picture, and then the inventor is putting that together, and then discerner is trying to figure out, okay, how do we make sure that we land this and we're successful on the project, and so forth, until we get to the tenacity to actually finish the project. And so think of this as, let's say we were going to fly somewhere. So let's say, Chaz, through his wonderful connections, that he has a buddy that says, hey, you know what, Chaz, I'm going to loan your team my, G3 jet for the night, and you can do whatever you want with it. So Chaz is like, man, right on. And so Chaz might tap into his wonder and maybe pull a few people together, and it's like, wow, we have this plane. Where should we go? And so then that's where then the inventor might come in and say, hey, yeah, man, G3 has this amount of range, and hey, you know what? Like, who all has been to the Ark down in Kentucky? That's Noah's Ark, the replica that was built and museum down in Kentucky. It's like, man, maybe for this group, we're gonna fly tomorrow to go see the Ark, and we're gonna fly down and we're gonna fly back. And so that's the inventor coming out. And it's like, the inventor might even go as far as like looking up online, what does the weather look like tomorrow? Oh man, weather is going to be perfect from here all the way down to Kentucky, and there's our invention. This is how we're going to use this great plane that was offered to us. But then we might have the discerner who comes in, and so this is where the discerner might come in and say, okay, great idea, and there is a little airport right by the arc that we can fly to. But the thing is a G3 is a little bit bigger of a plane and uses a lot of gas. And so we might have just enough gas to actually get down to Kentucky, but they may not have the ground crew that either A, has the fuel. Do we know that they actually carry jet fuel? They might just carry high octane plane fuel. It may not even have jet fuel. They may not have the ground crew to actually check out and make sure that everything is on the plane correctly. So the discerner is going to look at those little details and say, okay, let's think about that. And through that ideation process, they're going to come back and say, hey, you know what? Let's stop in Blue Ash, Cincinnati. There's a little bit bigger of a airfield there. We're going to stop there, get fueled up, then fly the rest of the way, and then have enough fuel to fly back to Blue Ash before we come back and fly all the way up to here. And so that's where that discernment comes in, is they're thinking about those extra details to really make this trip much more successful. And then we're going to have the galvanizers. And so now we're like getting the team bigger and so forth. And we're going to have the galvanizers that are going to be like, wow, this is awesome. We've already thought through all of these different things, and let's rally everybody. Let's get everybody together. We're going to figure out all the fine details of when we're going to leave and those types of things. And we're going to get everybody pulled together. And we're going to also identify what all of our different roles and responsibilities are. So we already had a group of us that did the ideation, but now they're going to pull together the enablers, and those are going to be the people that are going to help get us loaded on the plane and make sure that all the snacks and everything are all put together. But then we might also have the tenacity people, and those are the people that we want to make sure that, man, when we land in Blue Ash, that all of the checklist items, that the fuel is all filled up, that the landing gear and all those things are going to be checked off, and they're going to be the ones responsible for making sure that all the checklists are hit, so that way our trip is successful. And so that's when, again, we have that enablement, and all the people along the trip are able to have this successful trip. We're able to get down there on this beautiful plane. We're going to have the snacks. We're going to enjoy our trip. We're going to get back safely, and it's going to be an amazing trip for everybody. And that's how everybody comes together and working in their geniuses to create that successful trip. So that makes sense for everybody? Cool. So why does this matter? So the altitude of genius is imagine if we were flying down there and we start getting, about halfway there and we're not quite to Blue Ash. And then, me, the wanderer and inventor, comes up and it's like, hey, you know what? If we actually veer off, what if we land in this other place? What if we just go down to Nashville? Nashville's a really, really fun city, and go there. And what am I doing? Is I'm disrupting the plan, and I'm going, we're already down, pretty much down towards the 10,000 feet. And what am I doing? I'm pulling the yoke back up and trying to get back to 30,000 feet with coming up with a whole new plan and invention when I really didn't need to. Now, what else could happen is if we didn't actually activate it, and let's say we just had wonder and invention, and so let's say Chaz comes to me and says, hey man, I got this plane, and I'm like, all right, let's go down to the arc, and we didn't have all of that activation and so forth. What would we be doing? We would be nosediving the plane, and we'd have a very, very turbulent flight along the way. And so what we have to think about is what is appropriate when during a project to be able to bring these different geniuses to the table. So any questions on any of that? Does this model make sense for everybody? All right. So let's get into our working genius profiles. So did everybody get their working genius profile? It should have been emailed to you right after you took the assessment. And so your results, this is where it's going to show you your two geniuses, your two working competencies, and then your two frustrations. So I'm actually sharing. These are the results of mine. Yes, I'm like pretty much fully landing the plane, the full spelled out widget in with the letters in order from my genius to frustration. So yeah, it's like people look at this and it's like, oh, okay, well, this is just the model. No, it's like, no, that's actually my results. Oddly enough, so as I mentioned, I'm a wonder and inventor, but I actually have a competency of discernment. And this is where I've run into other people that are wonders inventors. But if their frustration is discernment, that's might be where they may not quite see the value of discerners. And so this is where I was very quickly able to identify, because oftentimes I'll do a little bit of discernment on myself, but I would not necessarily be as judgmental or feel guilty when people would discern me, because at least it was a competency. I did see the value of it, and now I understand it a lot better. So it was a competency for me. And sometimes when I'm in a group of people and we don't have enough discernment, that I can use my discernment and be okay with that. It's not going to drain me. It's not going to give me energy, but it's just not necessarily going to drain me. And the same thing with galvanization. I'm able to get in front of a group of people and galvanize, just like kind of like I'm trying to be galvanizing here and offer some excitement and so forth, to the material. But I definitely couldn't do this as a full-time job. I can't do training or these types of things, being in front of people for a full time, because it's actually on the latter side of my competency. And so it's not necessarily a genius, but it's not a frustration, which means that I can do it, but wouldn't necessarily be the best full-time job for me. And then frustration, these are areas where definitely that might if I'm doing these for a full period of time, that it's going to be draining. Now the thing is um, can I get away with spending 100% of my time just in my working genius? As much as I would love that, that's really not that practical. And I recognize that. And I recognize that there are things that I'm going to have to enable. And there are things that I need to do, with and be tenacious and actually, finish things. Otherwise, I'd be, very in trouble with the IRS because I wouldn't get my taxes done, because that's probably one of the biggest tenacity things that I absolutely don't like doing. But, it's like I still have to do those things. And so this is where I'm able to look at is how do I get as much time as possible in my day in my genius? And then that might, maybe I can balance it out. Maybe I can, if I can get, let's say, 3/4 of my day in my genius and then have quarter of my day in my, frustration or my competencies, that's still a pretty good day. And I'm actually still able to get a lot of things done. I'm just able to recognize, what that balance is. Kind of some notes, though, with our, and this is really, really important, not just for us, but also especially as we're hiring employees and have employees, is keeping in mind our competencies. As I mentioned earlier in this is not about whether you're good or bad at something. It's just what gives you energy and what drains you. And so one of the challenges is that oftentimes what happens when you're at work and you're asked to do something and you do it really well. Then what happens? Wow, you did that really well. You must be great at that. And now somehow that actually becomes your work and that becomes your job. And the thing is we accept it. Yeah, you know what? I'm really, really good at this. And yeah, I don't mind doing it. And the company recognizes me and they value me for doing this type of work. But what usually happens after a year or two? And I definitely run into this a number of times. Our business has been around since 2001, so over 20 years. And I have had some absolutely fantastic employees that we've run into where, man, they were just absolutely incredible. We're doing their job really well. And then we would be completely blindsided when all of a sudden they would turn in their resignation. And we're just like, dude, we thought you were happy. Like you're making great money. We're rewarding you. We're recognizing you. You're really engaged well with your team. We had no idea that this was coming. And neither did they. They just recognized that, you know what, after a couple of years of this, not getting fulfillment, not getting joy, not feeling like they're actually achieving purpose. And so that's what happens when you can get stuck in your competencies. And this is where it becomes very, very important to really understand what your geniuses and competencies and frustrations are, because this can really, really show up in that day to day for work. And if you're in a job where you're required to, especially be in your frustrations, man, talk about really being in the wrong seat. And, but then even being just in your competencies and recognizing that you're only going to be able to do that for so long before, you're going to get eventually get burned out and so forth. And like I said, even in your frustrations, this does not mean that you're not good at it. In fact, I'll even say on the opposite side, just because something is your genius doesn't mean that you're good at that either. So just because you might be a great discerner or a great galvanizer or enabler or so forth is not talking about your competency in actually being able to do the work. So, I can't have a medical doctor come to me and say, hey, Doug, I need your invention to come up with a solution of, I'm doing a bypass surgery in 2 hours and I need a solution for figuring out how to work my way around this artery. Just because I have the genius of invention does not qualify me that I'm going to be able to conduct an invention for, solving this guy's, surgery. And so that's kind of the big thing to keep in mind is that, this is where sometimes we'll get confused where we'll be really good at something, but it can still drain our energy. Sometimes what we can do is we'll also compensate for our frustration. And so one of the interesting things was when I got the results of my assessment, I actually was quite surprised that I wasn't higher on enablement because I actually thought that I was a good enabler. And I actually love to jump into projects. And oftentimes, when we have a problem with a customer, and I'll just jump right in, and there's a level of programming and stuff like that that I can actually do and do really, really well. But what I discovered is that when I was doing that, I was not working in a gift of enablement. I was actually rolling up my sleeves and actually using my gift of invention. And I was just inventing on the fly, which was giving me fulfillment because I was inventing. But as soon as I had that invention, then it turned into frustration. And then I would also even have sometimes that because it's like, man, now I'm having to finish this and then be able to instead of somebody else working. So this is where I'm able to now go in and basically see, okay, I was able to get it to the invention to what was going to solve that customer problem that now I can turn over to my team and they can take it the rest of the way. So how common is each genius? This is one of the things that I absolutely love about this model is because, I'm a wonder and inventor. And so, I always thought that it's like, well, so are other people. Most people are wonders and inventors. Well, thank God that he created a place where everybody is not wonders and inventors. Because could you imagine if everybody on Earth were wonders and inventors? We would not get anything done. And the thing that I loved about this model the most is recognizing, because I was always afraid to ask people to do enablement and tenacity because I was carrying that guilt. And one of the things that this model shows me, of all the people that have taken this assessment so far, that the vast majority of people that are out there are enablement and tenacity people. That there are people out there that truly love and get fulfillment out of getting things done, and that I'm actually, you know, it's a good thing for me to give up things because I have people that actually want to help. Whereas I was always afraid before of giving things up. So I do want to take a few moments before we take a break. So does this resonate with you guys? So anybody want to share kind of what their geniuses were and frustrations, and maybe how that shows up for you?
I have a question, Doug. Can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
absolutely.
On this that you have on the screen right now, it has normal distribution 33.33% each. Is that an average? Or I don't understand what that figure is.
Man, it has been too long since I have had college statistics. So
Sorry.
I can't remember what normal, just I know I used to know, but not coming to me. Any statistics people on the call that understand normal and standard deviation and all that?
It's not that big of a deal. I just thought if you knew. I always question things.
No, hey, that's a great. So are you using wonder on that, or are you coming with some discernment on that one?
Well, I like to balance them, you know.
There you go.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else? What were some of the other what were some of your geniuses?
So Doug, I really like that you said that you can really be good at something, but it can also drain you.
Mhm.
Because my green, I guess, is the way that it comes up on the assessment, is enablement and invention. And so the other stuff, I'm like, oh, but I like that stuff, but I don't realize how much it drains me.
Right.
The ones that are my red, galvanizing and tenacity, and especially tenacity, like just like grind when I have to finish something out for the week or whatever. So yeah, I like that you said that we can do it, and we can be good at it, but it doesn't mean
Yep.
it drain us. So thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I guess
I
much like
constantly
Amanda.
have ideas, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I just share briefly. I constantly have ideas, so I thought that I would be wonder, okay? But in reality, a wonder is actually the high end of frustration for me because I don't like to be there long, okay? I have lots of ideas, but I don't like to hang out there very long, okay? I want to get to work and invent it then, make it work. And so I don't like to be in wonder very long. Even though I get ideas a lot. So that was a real wake up for me to see that particular result, and also that I was a discerner, and thinking about how to move forward. Because really, most of the time I'm like, I want to get going, and I don't care about the details, So I was kind of surprised that I was discerning in the middle, but then when I sat back and realized that I like to do, and with a lot of you one-on-ones and whatnot, that's where my discernment comes in. So my discernment comes in at different times than when I expect it to, right? And so it's really just kind of understanding then what parts of you work at different situations, and it really gets you thinking, and you get to appreciate knowing who you really are from that standpoint.
Cool. Anybody else?
I could go next. My two high ones are galvanizing and enablement,
Nice.
which I love encouraging.
Yeah.
But I also thought, sort of like with Chaz, my two lowest ones for me was discernment and wonder, which was kind of weird because I always love asking questions too. You know, what do you talk about this? What you know? So I always thought that that would be a little higher, but it's my least. But I am an encourager.
Yeah. Cool.
Anything?
And for me, my top two were enablement and tenacity, and I can relate with those two. I want to get it done. I want to check it off my list, and I definitely feel good when I can check it off the box and it's done. I do feel good. My working competency is I and W, but my working frustrations are galvanizing and discernment, and I can relate with that too. I don't like rallying people, but I can do it. I like to discern, but I don't like to stay there long. I just want to get it done.
Yeah.
So those are mine.
Awesome.
Yeah. I go, my working geniuses are wonder and tenacity.
Wow.
Polar, like at the
Yeah.
ends of it. So, but it was spot on, for me. I just said this last week. What brought me joy was at a work meeting. I was like, getting a project done.
Yep.
So that was spot on for me. I do love to wonder and like a think tank, just come up with ideas. And my working competencies were discernment and enablement.
Wow.
But sometimes it can, I guess it can drain me a little bit. The enablement piece, discernment, I thought I would be maybe a working genius, but and my working frustrations are spot on. They are invention and galvanizing. I can do them. Like right now, I have for the first time someone reporting to me, and it takes a lot of energy. Like I have to give and rally her or get people if I'm working on a project, but it's a lot of work and it does drain me because there's a lot of detail that I want to put into it. So it's the detail of the thing that to me part of the galvanizing kind of drains me, but I can't get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug, she should be working with you and me. We'd be getting some stuff done.
Exactly.
She would understand what we're talking about,
Yep.
and then help us do it, right? That would be amazing. That's a good match right there. You and Shakia are a good match.
Well, and that's where when we go to talk about the teams, that'll be really good. So we are an hour in. Does anybody need to take a break, or should we keep going? Raise the hands if we need to take a break. Anybody? All right, we're good. Cool. All right. So our unique pairings. So this showed up in our testing, and so this is where we get into kind of how we can communicate our geniuses a little bit and understand them a little bit. And so mine being a WI, that means that I'm a creative dreamer. And within that, and so now I can, communicate with people like when I go to others and I'm like, oh, hold on, my dogs are going nuts. Hold on a second. I think people playing outside or something. So, I could go to, I went to friends. I'm like, hey, so am I a creative dreamer? If I, said to Chaz, it's like, Chaz, would you say I'm a creative dreamer? And it's like, usually everybody's like, oh, yeah, like you're totally a creative dreamer. But one of the most important things in this is that, well, what does that mean? And so what I crave is consideration. They want, people to generally consider what they're wondering about and for the questions to be heard. Hey, that's a great question. So there's like that affirmation, freedom. They want the freedom to create an event without constraints and restrictions. Um, they're crushed by being dismissed and constraints. And so like that very, very much, resonates with me. And so what helps with these pairings and being able to pull these together is that it helps you kind of understand that narrative a little bit more. And so before we actually start sharing a little bit, want to get into what some of the different pairings are. And so it's the order of your geniuses don't necessarily matter. So it doesn't matter whether you're a WI or an IW to be a creative dreamer. They kind of have it just narrowed as clumped together as those geniuses. So we have these creative dreamers, contemplative counselor, philosophical motivators, idealistic supporters, careful implementer. So all these different, I won't read through all of them. But what were some of the pairings that you guys received, and do you feel that those resonated with you?
I am a IE, EI, which is the adaptable designer. And I was just reading it, what I crave, and I was like, freedom, and that is the part of my heart. And, appreciation, and I it's like it hit it right on the nail. And not necessarily that you need to know that I did the work, but that I made a difference by helping you get it done. That
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. I think Caden, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm right in your camp there. Same with the creative dreamer. And
Nice.
yeah, I completely agree with that one.
Yeah, I think the engagement that we had together, I can definitely recognize a fellow creative dreamer.
Yeah.
And, one of the things with this is that, one of the values to this, I know a lot of us are just starting their businesses or new to their business, but one of the things that we often make the mistake of in, like, hey, sorry.
Woof.
Sorry about that. I was like just flipping out. Completely lost where I'm at. The
you're talking about the creative dreamer, something.
Oh, yeah. So when we go to hire people, one of the things that we tend to make the mistake of doing is hiring people just like us. And this is very, very common, especially early on in your business, because who do we like to hang out with? I love to hang out with other creative dreamers. But do I want a whole company of creative dreamers? And so oftentimes we very commonly will make that mistake of hiring people just like us versus really looking at the seats and so forth that we have and hiring appropriately. Caden, you had a question or a comment?
And more of a comment. So I actually would counter that based on personal experience. hanging out, casual wise, definitely would, be able to eat freely, network, and talk to other, creatives and whatnot. But when it comes to getting the work done, I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where, there's frustrations. My frustrations didn't shock me at all because I'm like, I want someone to do the work. I don't want someone to dream the work because I'm dreaming the work. And if both of us are dreaming the work, we're not getting anything done. So I actually find that in a workplace, I end up butting heads with the other creative dreamers because I'm looking for someone that'll do it, not someone that's going to dream it.
Exactly.
I think it's not someone similar to a marriage or, a relationship. You tend to, you hear people say, oh, the yin and the yang, we work because we're so opposite. I would agree with Kaden that I tend to be, like I would say I would probably butt heads with the people that are most similar to me. Because I'm good with this role. What is your, what are you bringing to the table? I'm bringing this. So I totally agree with you on that, Caden. And I think to keep a harmonious workplace, it's best to have different viewpoints and different strengths and different weaknesses so that you can appreciate what is in the other person versus feeling competitive with a coworker, to come up with the best idea or to get the thing done the quickest or whatever your strength is. If you're, chasing that same thing with the person, then that can create some resentment or, unhealthy competition instead of trying to be a balanced team that, picks each other up at the places they're weakest.
Absolutely. And this actually works at home too. So this will, work with your significant other and so forth, and even help in recognize and the dynamic and how you guys can work better, or even see where there might be some gaps. If you both have frustrations and tenacity, then it's just like, oh, you might want to consider hiring a housekeeper, so there's, somebody who actually, loves to do those details versus constantly bickering, like, oh, you forgot to take, do this, you forgot to do that. It's like, well, yeah, you both lack the tenacity to, maybe get some of those things done. So that's definitely helped in my household. So one of the things that within this narrative is, and in the assessment tells you kind of the I am, statement of your narrative. But one of the things in kind of applying my wonder and invention to this is I felt that like my competencies were still pretty high, especially my higher competency. And I was like, man, I really wondered what the statistics were of like, well, how close was my top competency with my second genius? And how easy would it be maybe for some of these to flip, or how close were they? So I was using my genius to actually ask those big questions. And especially when we think about within our businesses and recognizing, especially as we're small and we can't necessarily hire to have a whole team that fulfills every single one of the working geniuses, and having an entire crew of the geniuses. And even if, like I said, I have a company of, 60 some employees, and we still have gaps in certain areas like galvanization. And so where we can actually use our competencies to pair with our geniuses. So just like I'm a WI and I'm a creative dreamer, I also recognize that my top competency is discernment. And so then I kind of expanded the model. And what's interesting is I, invented a new model and sent it off to Working Genius. And so now there's a lot of other Working Genius people who actually use this this model. So this is my contribution to Patrick Lencioni and coming up with what I call the genius narrative. Because what I can say is that while yes, most of the time I'm a creative dreamer, I can be. And if I take my W and pair it with my top competency, so I can be a WD, which means that I can be a contemplative counselor. And it's like, yeah, that still completely resonates with me. And when I'm a contemplative counselor, I'm still getting a lot of joy and genius out of that. I'm still getting a lot of energy out of being that. And then I can even take it a step further, that I can take my I and my D, so my invention and discernment, and go as far as saying, or even and then take my I and D, which is down here, a discriminating ideator. And so now if people in my organization, they can come to me and say, hey, Doug, I need you to come in, and I don't need you to be a creative dreamer right now, but I need you to be a discriminating ideator, then I can come in and do that. And then to add to my narrative, and I actually put this on my LinkedIn, so I actually have my genius narrative on my LinkedIn. So it's like I can actually, tell people, hey, I'm a creative dreamer, or I can be a contemplative counselor, or even a discriminating ideator. And then I added, but not so much, don't come to me if you need a loyal finisher. Because that's my frustration. And so now everybody in my organization knows that it's like, oh, okay, well, we know where the loyal finishers are. Don't go to Doug when it comes to needing that loyal finisher. And I can always do the reverse of taking, my T and my G and, combine those together and say, yeah, I'm probably not an assertive driver, either. You can take it pretty far. This is as far as I've taken it. It's just at least recognizing your top genius with your top pairing, and then your bottom pairing. So everybody kind of do that, and does this still resonate with you? Anybody come up with what their genius narratives are? I know it's almost like a math problem to get these all lined up. And
Well, I know mine, Doug, because you gave them to me. I'm an adaptive designer, an enthusiastic encourager, or an evangelizing innovator, but I'm not a careful implementer.
Susie, would you agree with that, or Susie's not on anymore?
She's just dark. Yeah.
That's why Susie's here is she's our more careful implementer.
Yeah, she's our careful implementer. Yeah, for sure. And God brought us to her, thank goodness.
Exactly.
Yeah, it gives me energy to help out. So as a wonder enabler.
Anybody else?
I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
I am a enthusiastic encourager. I can be a assertive driver or a adaptable designer, but I am not a contemplative counselor. I think that's it.
And
Does that sound accurate?
Yes.
It
does.
Does your sister agree?
She just said yes.
I do.
Right.
And if I could go, I am a loyal finisher. I could be a creative dreamer. Definitely not an intuitive activator. And I completely agree. Completely agree.
Very cool. Isn't that kind of fun to be able to put those together like that? So I do love statistics, even though I don't know what a normal deviation is anymore, but I do love data. So how common is each pairing? And so this is, again, a really interesting statistic of, I think who on here said that they were a WT? Yep, so that's a pretty rare one. Yeah, only 4%, 4.87%. I guess a WG looks to be the rarest. So a wonder and galvanizer is pretty rare. Enablement tenacity is the highest pairing, which is good. We need a lot of people who with enablement and tenacity. people with responsive versus disruptive pairings. And so this is if you have a mixed pairing of being so 62% of the population have a mixed pairing, kind of like I do. Double responders, 21%, and then double disruptors, only 17%, which is pretty good. Again, you want that kind of you don't want to have a whole lot of double disruptors, out there. So having a lot of that mix is really good. And then distance between pairings. And so our T in the group, so 4.87%, so only 4.78. So that's the smallest population have that distance. Most people, it's just one away, and then two away, and so forth. So it just kind of shows like kind of where you fit with a lot of the others who have been taking this assessment. All right, cool. So I know we kind of discussed a lot of this. Any additional points on like have you seen this showing up in your work? How has this helped you with let's say your team? So if you work with teams and has this shown up, have you seen some of these challenges or frustrations showing up in the team, or having a team of too many people like you, or having that balance? Have you had times in your career when you were just working in your competency or frustrations, and then that has shown up, in the joy in your work and so forth? Erin, were you going to say something?
I definitely. So we have some new team members at my work right now. So we do, and if you're into this kind of thing and you haven't done them, we do strength finders, and we do spiritual gifts as well. So there's always some great, when you're taking the test, you're like, well, maybe somewhere in the middle of this, but in general, I do think they kind of lead you in a path. And I had taken this test. We did it over a year ago, and I did it again. I was like, I'll just use that one at the last minute, like literally 10 minutes, 15 minutes before this. I did it again just to say like, oh, I wonder. And I did change my 4 and 5 flopped, but probably not. They were probably pretty close anyway. But I definitely see, especially my frustrations, the things I find myself frustrated with at my job are the things where I feel like I'm being asked to do things in my frustrations that I'm like, listen, I've told you I'm not good at this. This is not, it doesn't bring me joy, and I'm not good. I'm not that great at it. And it's like, you're not using me to my best abilities. And so I think I would love some, I guess, action steps to like how to improve the frustrations, not just know that they exist. I'm sure there's some information on that somewhere, but the things you're good at it's great. Keep being that, but I would like to be able to mitigate some of the frustrations.
Cool. I love that you actually brought up spiritual gifts, because I think that this even falls in alignment with. I've not been able to. I've done some research and so forth around like specific points, but I think even just recognizing what gives you energy, and then aligning that with your spiritual gifts, and the types of work that then and how you use the gifts and so forth. But it's definitely been something that I've been wanting to kind of do a deeper dive around and finding those.
I was going to say that I think, and I could be way off on this, but I think the older that you are, we're used to accepting doing more frustrations.
Yeah.
I think the older we were, we're used to, even our parents and grandparents worked in factories, right? A lot of factories when, we're making more things in the United States, right? And not a lot of service, but just making things. And we had a lot of people that had to do that because that's the only thing that was available in their town, right? So a lot of frustrated people. But you became accepting of that because you had to, right? These days, I think our younger people are more looking for happiness now, and they're leaving something if they don't get it, right? And so it's almost like this assessment is so much more important to our younger people because they are so much more looking for happiness than we were, and not accepting frustration as much, you know?
Yep.
So, so I think that's just my interpretation of seeing younger people and older generation here, you know?
Yeah.
I think when it comes to spirituality too, though, they're like at church yesterday, they were preaching on, using your God-given gifts. If you're generous, be generous and do it with, zeal. And if you're, a hospitable person, then be hospitable. If you're, whatever it is, whatever your spiritual gifts, whatever your working genius are, use those gifts. Don't set them aside, don't hide them in a rock. And so I think it's not so much wanting I'm calling myself young, that's not real, but I don't want to be happier. I'm happy, I'm a happy person. That does not come from my work or my, whatever else that comes from, something much bigger. But I do think it is a call to be the best, using my gifts that God gave me to the best of my ability. And when I feel like I'm using other things I have to do, it's not because I want to be happier. It's because I want to bring more glory to God. And I feel like I'm not doing it in my frustrations. So, and there's some lesson to be learned there too, I'm sure. But I think that's just my view on,
I'm
maybe
with you, and that's why I like Colby, because Colby told me what my gifts were more. So I understand my gifts more by taking Colby, and I sat back and go, oh yeah, those are my gifts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think multiple assessments sometimes kind of help you to fit into your spot. Is anybody here taking Colby? Colby's a good one to take. I'm a 3493. Doug, what are you?
I am a 4296.
Yeah. So then there's another whole assessment of what your gifts are and how those align with people. And boy, that helped. That pegged me, told me exactly. And I was like, yeah, boy, those are my gifts.
Maybe our group we have a lot of different talents and whatever is here. This means our group could work together well, except Dion and I were the same. We might butt head, and I'm kidding. Maybe we need to come up with the next great assessment is how you take strength finders, spiritual gifts, Colby, working genius, and then how do you see them? How do you put them all together to really paint a really full and robust picture? This can be you guys. We've created the next great thing. Let's, Chaz, you're the guy. Go make it happen.
We are collecting this data. So that's one of the things that I've been working with the team on is collecting this data. And it's not to use the data in anything nefarious. It's actually like if you're starting your business and you're like, man, I really need some discernment here. Mm-hmm. That now you can go to this collection and be able to. It's like, hey, I need some discernment, good discernment on this, and that we can actually pull from this data and actually now align you with others, and that we can actually help each other more. And doing exactly what you're saying. Because I've done strength finding. I'm kind of a assessment junkie. Anytime somebody is says an assessment that I haven't heard of, I'm writing it down, and within an hour I will have taken it and and wow, okay, how do I learn more about? I love assessments. So, but it does give you a broader picture, and then if we can pull that together, and we're actually as Noble, we're working on a. Those of you who know Jeff Elder, he is working on a spiritual gifts assessment as it relates to our work in entrepreneurship. And so now we'll have that and then be able to even, pull that data in. Because it is we're all here to collaborate and share and help lift up each other. And we see that as a valuable tool for being able to help pair people and bring people together that can help with each other.
And then we have Brian Miller, who's one of our leaders as well. and his company actually helps to build company culture. So he wants to go and talk about what you were just saying, Aaron, and mixing all of these assessments together and figuring out then, building that perfect culture. What of those combinations do you need on your team to build that perfect culture? So actually, we've got people working on that. So maybe we'll come up with something here soon. Who knows? We're getting there.
All right, some genius misconceptions. So wonder slow things down. While it's a misconception, I think probably half my company would say otherwise. That's probably very true, but no, that's common misconception. Only inventors are creative. No, anybody can invent and be creative. Discerners are always right. So this is where I get into that doesn't necessarily equal competency.
Discerners just always believe they're right.
Exactly.
I'm married to one. I'm kidding. All you discerners, it's just a joke.
Remember, we're recording this.
Yeah. Galvanizing is just cheerleading. And like I said, I actually kind of used to believe this, and now I recognize that it's been a huge gap in our company because they understand the why and they actually connect people to that why to actually truly galvanize and get things done. Enablement is the only helping genius. Like I said, it's like I'm helpful, but I'm usually bringing my invention to or my geniuses into how I'm being helpful versus just bringing enablement. And then tenacity is always detail oriented. And I can truly assess, as we have a lot of people in our organization that have tenacity, that they are not detail oriented. So unfortunately, I wish that was the case, but not always.
Susie just brought up a good point about this helps with your family as well, which is a great thing to do. And it's very interesting because I have always worked outside the home, and so is my wife. But in the last year and a half, my wife is now working from home, and she created a nonprofit to help women. Okay. And so now my office actually is primarily at home. And so, and I'm the kind that comes home at the end of the day and I don't want to talk at all, so she'll ask me a question and she wants to talk, right? I don't want to talk. Okay. So I give like one word answers, and that's not what she wants. Right. But the thing is then those of you that have been on one-on-ones with me, she's heard me in a day do 4 or 5 one-on-ones for an hour and a half, with people. And then she goes, okay, now I understand why you don't want to talk, but so sometimes it just takes, a little sit down explanation, and these kinds of assessments can really help build relationships and understand, how you can work together better and appreciate the other people and what their talents and what their frustrations are.
Absolutely. The working genius for leaders, building self-awareness, so working with leverage and regulation genius at work. So oftentimes, like depending on where I'm being brought in, I used to be very disruptive, creating a lot of turbulence when somebody would bring me into a project meeting and I'm like, oh man, we could make this better if we do this. And I'm coming in and trying to change, the thing last minute. So now I'm recognizing, okay, what are the times where I leverage my genius, but also where are the times that I'm regulating my genius? How do you tap into others to fill in the gap? And we'll cover that when we get into some of the team mappings, but recognizing it's like, hey, we have this gap here and let's maybe bring in, hey, we have discernment as a gap. Let's bring Chaz in, or let's bring, some people that we think could be, good discerners or enablers or whatever. How do you best appreciate and reward others? So again, oftentimes, especially as leaders, we think about what we think that would be recognized as a reward, but understanding where their geniuses are, that maybe, you know, those rewards may not be have the same effect that we might think they might have. And then how can you better lead meetings? And so the types of meetings that we have. So as I mentioned, regulating our genius. So, you know, this is where we need to have considerations for when, you know, where are you at in the stages of work? And so again, you know, I can't be in a project meeting where the team is about 2 days away from finishing a project for a customer, and I can't come in with a bunch of wonder and invention to rethink about how we can make it even better for the customer. But they still might want me to come into the meeting if, like, hey, we're experiencing this challenge, and maybe we need some wonder and invention to come up with a fix that's going to get us over the finish line. And then are your geniuses called for this stage of a meeting? And then announcing and tapping into the genius. And this is also where you can give permission to others to even suggest regulation. You know, I've given permission to my team of like, hey, Doug, we don't need your wonder right now. We don't need your invention right now. And I can honor that. And I was like, okay, yep, thanks for the check. You're right. I'm going to create turbulence if I go too far here. And being able to have that good trust and communications as a team. So speaking of teams, we're going to talk a little bit about as you grow your organization, and this is again why we're collecting this data, because a lot of us have smaller organizations that we might be having some gaps in the people that we're working and collaborating with and so forth. And so this is idea of creating a team map. And so this is where we take a group of people and create a map that allows us to recognize the strengths of our groupings, maybe where there's some weaknesses or underrepresented geniuses, or even maybe where there's some represented geniuses. And then even identifying who the leader of the group is or who the leader particular stage of a group. And so this is an example of a team mapping. So this is actually all of our management and leadership and key staff in my company. And so obviously there's a lot here. And so what we do is we break this down then to teams. And so this is a team map of just my revenue team. So this is my salespeople and my marketing people and so forth. And this is where I can go in and be able to see. So this is where I can actually go in and see, I don't have any genius within my revenue team. And so what does that tell me? And so if I actually go here and look, there's some gap analysis. And so this is where I can go in and identify, okay, well, when you don't have enough discernment, team can be surprised by failures, fail to adequately evaluate and refine ideas and initiatives. Oftentimes this can be like for my sales team, this might be where everything is an opportunity. And they don't have the discernment to say no sometimes because it's like, dude, we can make money on this. Like, we can do this. And it's like, no, that's not our core business. We're not going to necessarily make. So they don't have that discernment or even that discernment of like, oh, the customer wants to do it this way. And they're just going to be, enabling. And if we go back to our map, you'll see that I have a lot of enablement and galvanizing in my sales team, which is awesome. Like, they're great at being responsive to a customer and even galvanizing a customer to a solution. But sometimes without that discernment or even, sometimes that wonder and invention, it's like helping them understand where a customer is in their process and making sure that we're actually also even helping the customer go through that ideation, activation, and implementation. And how we do that is by them recognizing that, hey, we don't have much discernment. In fact, you really look at it, they have a ton of frustration around that. So they even don't like to, it's not even a competency. They do not like discernment. It's a frustration. So this is where they have, hey, here's all of our discerners in our organization. These are the people to bring in, and whether we're designing a solution or you're thinking of a sales strategy or those types of things, these are the people that you want to bring in that aren't in the revenue team, but they can actually help out with making sure that we're taking discernment into consideration within the map. And so we do this for then all of the different departments. So this is our project management team. And so same thing for them. I don't have I don't have much wonder and invention. I've got a lot of enablement and tenacity. So I've got project managers who love to check boxes. And that is awesome for project management. I don't want project managers that aren't, good at checking off the boxes, because otherwise we can't invoice projects. But when it comes to, let's say, problem solving, well, this is where, wonder and invention, they don't have that. So again, this is where they can go and bring in the wonders and inventors when they're running up against some of those challenges. And same thing, this is our engineering and what we call our development and innovation team, and same thing. So everybody in our organization actually has these different mappings. These are our support and customer service team, and so forth. And so this is where then again, I'm also training them in understanding that not only where when you have missing components, so we had like missing wonder and invention, or we had missing discernment, or if we have missing tenacity, we can go through here and we can even identify up front where some of our challenges might be. So if we're missing wonder, then might fail to identify opportunities, problems, or potential, might lack curiosity and concern for unmet needs. If we're missing invention, revisit the same problems repeatedly with little progress. Cost gets caught up in the status quo or lacks outside of the box thinking to allow for innovation. If we're missing discernment, implements inadequate or ineffective ideas, solutions, or have high rates of failure, overly reliant on data to make decisions that are best used using judgment. And so we have, going through these, we can identify where some of these gaps are when we lack it, but also you can also misuse gifts. So when you have too much of something, so if you have too much wonder, then this is where you might overthink the possibilities and can risk not taking action. So if you have just a bunch of wonderers, then we're constantly wondering and we're never taking action on things. If we have too much discernment, ignores others' judgment and can be dismissed ideas without sensitivity, gets caught in analysis paralysis and can be slow to make decisions. If we have too much tenacity, rushes right to the tactics and execution before the idea or innovation is fully explored. So this is a very, very useful tool to really look at, okay, when we're putting a group together, what are some of the potential challenges or misusings that can happen in a team? And this is where I can come in and I do this for organizations where I'll come in and help do these assessments. So that way teams can recognize where their blind sides are. And then they can see where they might get caught into some of these traps and be aware of it, and then be able to recognize when they need to bring in others. So for those of you who are interested, this is the Noble Cleveland group. So all of our Cleveland contingent. So we've had a lot of people from Cleveland that took the assessment. Again, it's kind of interesting. We have a ton of enablement, ton of tenacity, ton of invention, a lot of good, wonder, some good discernment. little tight on some of the galvanizing and a lot of frustration in galvanizing. And so if we were, let's say, if the Cleveland team were to, let's say, come up with like, hey, we want to do a big fundraiser, or we want to have a big charity event, or do something as a group and organize teams around doing that, this is where this team builder can really come to play. Because in the early stages where we're having a lot of idea and ideation, well, then you might want to, have less people that those are in their frustrations for those types of meetings, and save those people for when that is more of their genius. But also aligning the teams together so each one of your different teams have a good balance of the strengths in the right places. Didn't want to leave out Pittsburgh, so we don't have quite as many people in Pittsburgh who have taken the assessment, but so far, here's your guys' group. So within the group so far, we don't have any galvanizing. So this is, again, if we look at that, if we put just the people who did this together, and let's say they were putting a business together, or let's say they were working on a big event, for Covenant Pittsburgh, then we might recognize that the team might fall short on acting ideas that seem promising, might struggle to generate support momentum around those initiatives. So they might have some great ideas, but they might struggle with kind of galvanizing people to come in and help with that. And so this becomes very, very useful, not just as entrepreneurs and how we build our business, but even, doing this for churches and groups and families and those types of things. Is anything that we're trying to get work done is really understanding this among the team, and at least being aware, because I'm not saying that, Pittsburgh is not going to be able to get projects done because they don't have any galvanizers. No, we're just going to have to maybe recognize that this might be an area that might get kind of hung up on, but at least we have that awareness. And especially we recognize, well, yeah, there are some people with some frustrations with galvanization, but the team is big enough that there are people with competencies, and we might need some people with those competencies to come and step in and recognize that, hey, we really need you to be bringing your competency to this, because we don't have anybody with this genius. Or pull somebody from Columbus or one of the other groups and help you galvanize it. So there's always a lot of options to be able to pull those teams together.
Doug, if I could jump in real quick, just so the Pittsburgh people understand the difference, is that each time we do another class, we tweak and we improve, right? And so when we went to Cleveland, we included this when we were teaching. We didn't include this while we were in Pittsburgh doing Noble Academy, but we introduced it after, right? And we've offered it after, and that's why we haven't had the participation yet from Pittsburgh, because of that. But each time we tweak and we try to improve the class to offer and include more. And this is one thing we didn't initially include in Pittsburgh.
This is some of the Columbus team. So this is just the people who have taken the assessment in the last few months. So I think Caden, you're on here, and a few of the other Columbus team. And so again, a little bit of a little bit of a little light on discernment. But also discernment's also light on frustrations. So we have a good amount of people, that probably have some competency there that, that can be leaned on. So that's pretty helpful. Any ahas or insights or, thoughts when you guys have engaged with teams that where you guys can see this being valuable?
I think it's actually really valuable to develop ministry teams.
Absolutely.
I do missions, and just even given this to like mission teams and watching that happen, and because so much needs done when you're in the mission field.
Yeah.
And so I could really see it benefiting ministries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it definitely gave me some insight into how I think about things and why there are things at work I'm frustrated about. You know, I'm in IT and we're forced to do everything all the time. But so, you know, my genius was invention and discernment, but my frustrations were galvanizing and enablement. And so sometimes I just don't understand why people just don't do what they know to do, you know, why they have to be why you have to rally them. It's like, come on, you know what you have to do, just do it. So that was kind of good for me to see. And then I'm thinking about having my kids take this. So I'm like, you know, just to kind of get a little bit more insight on maybe how they're thinking, or, you know, how they look at the world, or, you know, just what their frustrations may be or where their genius areas are.
Actually, so how many kids do you have?
3. I have twin
Three.
boys, 26, and then my daughter's 22.
So Susie, can you send me Sonia's information? So there is brand new, just in the last month, a student version of this assessment.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
And I haven't given it to anybody yet. Because I actually I gave it to my 15-year-old,
Okay.
and it was like too adult for them. Like they got very frustrated even just taking the assessment.
Okay.
And so now there's a new student version, and I'm real curious to see what those results look like. So I would love to offer it to your kids, and then yeah, if you have a spouse that you want to offer it to, I'll offer you a free assessment of your whole family.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
I think something that you all can think about, because most of you, or if not almost all of you, are pretty new businesses, right? And you don't have a very big team. It's not like any of you have 5 people, on your staff, that you can really start to think about this with or whatever. But how you can be using this is to find the right advisors and mentors and whatnot to be those that are supporting you, right? You need a discerner if you're not a discerner, right? You need certain people to keep you moving forward. If you're not a wonder inventor, then you're gonna need one of those to keep you fresh and to keep you continuing to think of how you can keep improving your business and what can your business do next, right? Whereas the discerner is constantly challenging you to make sure that you're performing the best that you can as a business and that you're thinking of everything, right? So think about that in your early stages, of those people that can be that good antithesis, that good balancing act to you. And it's also good to have some people that are like you too, right? Or a little blend, just to keep giving you some encouragement from that standpoint and bounce ideas off and those kind of things. But think about that as you're building your friends, as Doug would say, building your wolf pack of those people that you kind of want around you, that are early stage business owners, and some of them maybe a little further along, that can be those good advisors to you.
Cool. Well, just a few more slides. So I'm not going to get heavy into this because we obviously are working together as a team on projects. But this is where we might come in and do an analysis. So if, let's say, this was a department or a team of people at work, where we might analyze past projects to look at how maybe we can do things better and so forth in the future. Vlad, did you have a question?
I did, but I can wait till the end.
Okay. And so last section I wanted to cover is kind of the genius of meetings. And so recognizing the altitude of different meetings. So you have brainstorming type of meetings. And so that's, again, recognizing, okay, this is a brainstorming meeting. So we want to bring in a lot of idea and invention, and maybe not have a whole lot of discernment. We've all had those, like, okay, we just want to get everything out on the whiteboard. And then we've had those people that like start immediately coming in with discernment. It's like, dude, let's get everything on the whiteboard first, then we'll bring in some of the the discernment. So that gets into like, brainstorming versus like ideation, or and so we start recognizing who we start bringing into meetings and what those types of meetings are. And one of the things that we've been trying to implement within our company is even communicating that, telling people, hey, this is the type of meeting. And so these are the geniuses that we're wanting to bring into the meeting. And these are the geniuses that we might be trying to regulate in this meeting. So that way we're able to have the most effective meetings. And obviously the benefits to a team is, helping them understand the why and, where they've been successful or unsuccessful in past endeavors, avoiding unfair or unnecessary judgments around others and motivations, and alleviating their own guilt about struggles when they work. And so I know we haven't really applied, this into the teams, but I think you guys probably can value the types of meetings and understanding, what geniuses that you want to bring into that. So with that, that is all we have. Any big takeaways from anybody, or Vlad? You might be a good time for a question.
Yeah, I had a quick question regarding the frustrations. When I took the assessment, where in the assessment did it highlight the frustrations? How did it know your frustrations versus your strengths?
It should have within that. It should have told you your two geniuses, your two competencies, and then your two frustrations.
Right, but like when you pull up that list of in Columbus, I was under discernment, but then it showed me under the frustrations as well.
Yeah, so that's just recognizing. So if I was having, let's say, a particular meeting that might be, so what were your frustrations?
So it's the first one: discernment, enablement, wonder, invention, galvanizing, tenacity.
So galvanizing and tenacity. So I might not bring you into like a I might not bring you to a task oriented or a daily stand up, or at least recognize that if you are coming to that meeting, that we're going to recognize that there might be things in that meeting, because we're going to be talking about galvanization and tenacity of getting something done, that could be, if that's like, let's say, a really long meeting, that could get frustrating for you if that's all we're like kind of talking about. And so that's why we want on the chart, the competencies are great because we know that it neither gives energy or takes away, but we want to be cognizant of each other's frustrations. So that way I know that if I bring you into a meeting and it's all about tenacity and that we're all trying to get this stuff done, and it's like, man, yeah, that's your like big frustration, then we know, hey, let's really bring in the resources that this is their genius. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Or
thank you so much.
Cool. So some resources that are available, as I mentioned, this is available in a book. The thing I love about Patrick Lencioni's books is he writes everything as fables. So this isn't just like your normal self-help book that, is like, just tells you a bunch of things. He's actually telling a story of a or not a real life business, but basically a fake business that basically goes in and how they figure this out and how it applies. He even uses this within his church. And it's a really, really easy read story that helps you connect the dots. And he's done the same thing with all of his other books. And why he's been a really successful author is sometimes when we just get this download of information that we're not able to connect the dots as easy. So it's a really good read. So it is available on Audible. Then they have their website, workinggenius.com, where there's a ton of videos, and they also have a really great podcast that's available. And then obviously, I'm here. Here's a QR code to my LinkedIn profile. And I'm more than happy to work with you guys if you guys want a few minutes and just even go deeper on your particular assessment or have questions. Feel free to reach out. But then I also help out with leadership development and team development and rolling this out in companies. So if you have a company that you think that this will be useful, let me know. And either myself or there's others in the community that can help implement this. So any closing thoughts, ahas? Hopefully this was beneficial for everybody.